Broadcasting live worldwide. Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
And now,
you're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
We're America's only Jewish radio programs and regular broadcast radio on the internet and digital platforms. With us tonight to discuss the Young Israel movement has been a rabbinical organization. They have shuls, synagogues around the world, and the last number of years they've been engaged in more political events and to help free Jonathan Pollard, and they've had events with a lot of politicians, more the Republican than Democrats. They've been criticized for it, and just this past week they had a slate that elected a whole new board and got rid of the old, bringing the new, so changed the direction for the National Council of Young Israel. Joining us right now, Rabbi David Warshaw. He's a lifetime and a lifelong Young Israel member. I remember him many years ago when he was the director at the Young Israel of Flatbush. He was at Young Israel of West Hempstead, and he's been active in various Jewish groups, Our Soldiers Speak, and he was just elected the national president of the National Council of Young Israel. Rabbi David Warshaw, good to have you back. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you for having me, Zev. Good to be here.
And I know you for so many years. So this was a stealth operation, from what I'm told. About 5-6 weeks ago, a group of rabbis spearheaded by Rabbi Axelrod in one of the largest Young Israels in the country, which is in the Five Towns, which is in the Five Towns area, spearheaded the move, the Young Israel Woodmere, to change the direction of the Young Israel. So tell us what is going on, because there's a whole new board, out with the old and in with the new.
Okay, that is correct. About 6 weeks ago, a group of us got together, and the decision was made to run a slate of nominees in opposition to the past administration, I have to say, the slate nominated by the past administration's nominations committee. And it was, I wouldn't quite call it stealth, but it was
it was under the radar. I'm told it was done in secrecy. It wasn't publicized. It was done to get momentum and to keep it out of the public eye.
Well, we wanted to keep out of the public eye in the sense that we were very busy getting the slate together. We had a real team of people. We wound up with 17 people on the slate from all over the country, from Florida to Memphis to Detroit to California, and of course to Newark here, Massachusetts, Connecticut, etc. And it's a team. It's a true team. It's not about David Warshaw or any one individual or individuals. It's about our whole board and the way we cooperate and work together. And our primary goal is to extend that concept of teamwork really throughout the entire National Council of Young Israel constituent group of our more than 100 branches, by increasing our service to the branches and increasing the cooperation and sense of working together between the branches and the council.
For our audience that may not be familiar, just give us a little background what the National Council of Young Israel represents, what Young Israel movement is all about.
Okay, the Young Israel movement was founded actually in 1912. It was founded by a number of young of sons, really, or children of recent immigrants to New York, to the United States, who felt that the synagogues at that time were primarily Yiddish-speaking, really couldn't relate well to the needs of the younger population, who were becoming gradually, of course, Americanized. And the Young Israel movement grew out of that need, really responded to that need to provide synagogues in which these younger people could feel comfortable. There were lectures provided for them, all different types of youth programming, etc. And the movement grew into what we are today, over 100 branches throughout the United States. It is, because you can classify it as a modern Orthodox movement primarily, strongly religious Zionists, and of course very supportive of Israel and all major Jewish causes. And over the years, there was a bit of a disconnect between the central body, the National Council of Young Israel, which was the major national coordinating body, if you will, between it and the local branches. And we felt that the need here, there's a great need. We had some 45 synagogues, for example, that had expressed commitment and support for our slate prior to the election that was held last Wednesday. They were sending a very strong message in that they felt they needed service from the council. They needed this sense of cooperation and working together, which they felt was lacking somewhat. And that was the major plank of the platform on which we ran. And we're happy that there was a very positive response from branches throughout the country.
But there was some tensions, and I know I covered it about a year or so ago, where the feeling was amongst some branches that the National Council of Young Israel was focusing too much on politics. They had a dinner in New York. It was more Trump people than Democrats. They felt it was being politicized and being more to the right, more Republican-oriented than Democratic-oriented, and the feeling was that should be more synagogue services and less politics. So I think there were, in fact, you had one Young Israel that left the fold over it, where Deborah Lipstadt, a prominent historian, wrote a whole piece about it. There was a whole brouhaha. So this tension has been brewing for at least a year or so, if not more.
Well, that may very well have been the case, and probably was the case. But our group did not really come about as a response to that, or really in reaction to that. The feeling was that change was required, really in a very fundamental way, in the fact that the branches that are all called Young Israel all felt that, not all, but many felt that they simply were not being properly serviced and provided for. Their needs weren't being met, and there wasn't much cooperation, frankly, from the national body. And yes, there were some branches, some individuals perhaps, who felt that maybe there was a bit too much of politics and political advocacy going on, and in the sense that not to argue so much necessarily with the particular stands that might have been taken, but the fact that the primary focus of the organization really is, if you look at the Constitution, for example, of Young Israel, you'll see that it was formed as a means of promoting and fostering cooperation between the synagogues, creating a sense of camaraderie and almost like one big family devoted to the same goal. Really, Young Israel represents kind of like a lifestyle, if you will, and that's what many people were missing. They kind of felt that had been lost somewhat, and therefore there was this need, and that was really the need that our slate and our administration is really devoted to restore that.
But I would say probably this tension was a catalyst for it, because for a number of years the National Council didn't do as much outreach to branches and provide service materials and provide support for branches. It existed more for a period of time, was promoting which is an important cause, getting Pollard out of prison. And at some point it morphed into being more political. But I don't believe for a while there has been as much emphasis on servicing the spiritual needs of the synagogues.
Well, we're not talking about the spiritual needs specifically, but we're talking about the overall needs and service programming, for example, all sorts of programming, whether it be youth programming, teens, seniors, singles, all sorts of things that really that many of the synagogues are trying to provide on their own. Many of them do a very good job at it. But the fact is that if a synagogue in New York is running a very successful program, a Young Israel branch, why shouldn't the Young Israel branch elsewhere take advantage of that very same program and share the resources and share the knowledge? One of the things that I'm very proud of is the fact that on our slate, our new national board, we have people that are highly experienced in many different fields professionally, and they're going to bring and are bringing their expertise in their own personal professional lives to this National Council of Young Israel effort, and that's really what it's all about. We don't want to get too much in terms of politics and particular issues. As I said, it's not so much the specific issues that maybe were being addressed. You're correct in what you say that there were many branches that felt that they simply were not receiving the level of service that they felt they should be receiving, and therefore the message that we were promoting really it was responded to. It really reached the chord, and kind of the light bulbs kind of lit up in many people's minds. Hey, this is what we're missing. And this group sounds like they're offering it. And
we want to pick up on that point. Rabbi David Warshaw is our guest. He's the incoming president of the National Council of Young Israel. We'll be right back.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Talkline radio and TV with Zev Brenner is just phenomenal. Everybody concerned about the Jewish community should listen and watch. He has the best guests. He asks the most interesting questions. He's always so well prepared. It's talk radio and television from a Jewish point of view at its very best.
To advertise on the Talkline network and Talkline's email and social media blasts reaching over 70,000 people, please call 212-769-1925, extension 100. That's 212-769-1925, extension 100. or email info@talklinenetwork.com.
And we're back. Talkline with Zev Brenner over WABC 770 AM and WLIR 107.1 FM. Our guest is incoming president of the National Council of Young Israel, Rabbi David Warshaw, and there's been a change where there's a whole new slate that's taking over the Young Israel. And from what I understand, Rabbi David Warshaw, the old slate is out, which means that they're completely out. There's no one that remained from the old regime, so to speak. So this is a whole new start. Are any of them still going to be active in the National Council of Young Israel, or this is just a whole new direction completely?
Well, officially the National Board is totally new, but we do hope that members of the previous administration will join us in certain activities and support us and work with us, and we certainly invite them to do so. I had a very cordial and very pleasant conversation with my predecessor, Farley Weiss, and we're hoping that whatever we need to do on a cooperative basis will happen, and we do invite members of the administration to work with us and join together with us for the betterment of the Young Israel movement.
Now, there was a period of time, Young Israel, for those that may not be familiar, was a brand. If you were a synagogue looking to open up and you wanted to send a message of who you are, you became a Young Israel. It's a brand name for modern Orthodoxy. I would dare say that, and probably in the last number of years, there's probably less synagogues that are affiliated with Young Israel. I'd like to know what your plans are trying to get more synagogues when they open up to become affiliates of Young Israel.
Well, I wouldn't say that we've lost many synagogues, of course.
No, I'm saying new synagogue when they open up. Not that many really are becoming Young Israel affiliates or Young Israel synagogues. They're having different names. There was a period of time when a synagogue opened up, they automatically wanted to be a Young Israel synagogue. I think that has changed over the course of time.
I would agree that that's changing to some degree. I think that you have the overall situation in the community, perhaps, that there's been somewhat of a shift to the right, in a sense, in a certain way, which might be a factor in what you're describing. And therefore, you have many synagogues that are opening today, which might be smaller, might not have the exact same ideological views or other views as Young Israel's per se. But there's a big range within Young Israel itself. You have the term, we have a pretty big tent, if you want to use that analogy, that terminology, in which we have, branches. We go, from more to the right, if you will, center, even to the left a bit. And that's the great thing about Young Israel, the fact that it's not a monolithic kind of situation, but we can welcome people of many different stripes. We're a modern Orthodox organization, as I said, committed to Israel, religious Zionism, and that people know what that means in terms of our devotion to halacha and following halacha, etc. But that still gives us a range under which we can involve and invite a broad range of people.
Now, I believe some things have changed with the new slate. For example, it used to be if a synagogue was affiliated with Young Israel movement, it meant that if they had financial difficulties, the building would revert to the National Council of Young Israel. From what I understand, that provision is no longer the case.
Well, that was the original provision in the original Constitution. It was amended, and the position that we are taking right now is that if a particular branch does have financial difficulties, if it sees that it's almost ceasing to exist in terms of losing membership, not being able to provide regular services, etc., our position is that we'd like to work with that branch in a mutually amenable manner. And if that means that the branch is closing and their assets, a building, etc., that may be sold, if the branch wants those assets to go to Young Israel, to the National Council, for us to use to further the goals of Young Israel on the National Council, then that would be fine. We're not going to force branches into any kind of a situation. We're not going to seize property. The Constitution needs to be further amended to indicate that. But that's our position. We want to work together with the branches, and not to mention the fact that there may be a branch in place X that is having that difficulty, maybe a second branch in place Y, and we maybe have to bring them together and maybe solve some of their difficulties, solve some of their problems. So again, the overall approach is going to be one of reaching out and trying to deal with them in a collegial and I say almost like a familial kind of situation, where we try to help them in any way possible.
Stan in Forest Hills, your question for our guest. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question. I'm hearing, I may be hearing it underneath, but is it possible that the national political situation with Trump drove you to this situation? You felt that young Israel might be going too far to the right and Trump, and it might hurt the overall synagogue situation in terms of concentrating more on politics, and maybe you thought it hurt it, and not concentrating more on local religious issues. That's the way I'm reading it. Is it more now, you think, more open, modern, liberal? Or, I mean, is that what you were looking to do when you got rid of these people?
Well, we didn't get rid of anybody. It was an open election, obviously, and the voters, the delegates from the more than 100 branches that participated in the election voted. No, that really is not the case whatsoever. We had no political agenda or any political consideration here whatsoever. The fact was that the feedback we were getting from many branches was that they felt, as I said before, they felt underserviced and really not. They didn't feel as if they were really part of the overall national movement, and that's what we are here to address now, to try to increase that level of service, cooperation, transparency. That's what we're all about. We were not reacting in any way to the national political situation.
Here's the impression of this has been going on for a long time, where synagogues were not getting service by the National Council. It didn't just happen yesterday. It's
funding
been going on.
Funding too?
Well, I don't believe the National Council has been funding synagogues, but they provided resource services, right, Rabbi Warshaw? They provided resources, and it's been for a long time where they had significant resource allocated to the synagogue, whether it's youth groups and other activities. So I believe, from what I've been hearing, is that this whole thing where people were upset about the move of the young Israel politically to the right, to the Trump, to Republicans,
that's what I'm asking.
Accelerated, where all of a sudden say, "Hey, where's what's happened in young Israel? We want synagogues." So I think that accelerated this whole process.
Well,
so it's more developing national programs for the young Israel.
As I mentioned earlier, there certainly was that was certainly part of the situation, and there were people that felt that way. But again, the primary mover of our slate at that time, and now our new national board, is not a reaction to politics, and it would be totally apolitical, actually, as we should be, and to provide that service level, increase it by a great degree to the local branches. There's no funding involved.
Did you think it was more political, in your opinion? Had it been, and maybe you saw that happening?
Whether it was more political or not, as I said, is not the issue that motivated us to undertake this campaign and to run this slate, and now to have been elected. It was obviously the feeling of the majority of the delegates who voted at the election of this past Wednesday night that a change was needed, and that change, based on all of the conversations that we had and communication we had with many branches, was the need for increased service and cooperation and working together. That was the primary and really sole motivator of this entire effort. We did not look at this from a political viewpoint whatsoever.
Okay.
Thank you for your good question.
No problem.
But before we break, Rabbi Warshaw, but the fact is, from what I'm hearing from you, is that the young Israel is going to be apolitical, is not going to be involved. So before they were very involved, and from what I'm hearing now is you want to focus more on synagogue service. You want to be apolitical, means you don't want to really get involved in any kind of politics, which would be a stark contrast to what's been going on for the last number of years.
We don't want to get involved in politics. We will obviously advocate on behalf of Israel and on behalf of those other issues and causes that affect the Jewish community, certainly, but not necessarily from a political viewpoint. We will, as I said before, we're a religious Zionist organization, therefore very, very supportive of Israel, and that will be our positions. But it's not going to be a political stance. It will be one of support and expressing support and taking actions when necessary on behalf of Israel and other causes, but it will not be politically motivated or politically generated.
Our guest is Rabbi David Warshaw, the incoming president of the National Council of Young Israel. A major change has taken place in the composition of the board and the direction of the National Council of Young Israel, which is one of the largest modern Orthodox synagogue groups in the United States and beyond. When we come back, we continue to take some of your phone calls.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Talkline radio and TV with Zev Brenner is just phenomenal. Everybody concerned about the Jewish community should listen and watch. He has the best guests. He asks the most interesting questions. He's always so well prepared. It's talk radio and television from a Jewish point of view at its very best.
To advertise on the Talkline network and Talkline's email and social media blasts reaching over 70,000 people, please call 212-769-1925, extension 100. That's 212-769-1925, extension 100. Or email info@talklinenetwork.com.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
And Now.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now your host.
We're back, our final stretch with Rabbi David Warshaw, the incoming national president of the National Council of Young Israel. We'll take some of your email questions, zevbrenner@gmail.com, zevbrenner@gmail.com. We'll try to get one or two more phone calls in at 212-769-1925, extension 100. Deborah writes, Rabbi Warshaw, if they truly plan to be apolitical, why are all the members of his slate left-wing politically?
I have no idea what that is based on. I have no idea what that statement is based on.
Okay, but there's a perception because we live in such partisan times, so there's a feeling of, right, left, and
I understand, Zev, I understand that fully, but we have made no statements that are political in nature or have written anything that are political in nature which would give any indication as to how we lean left, right, center, or otherwise. So I have no idea what that statement is based on. I'm very sorry.
I would assume, though, that about a year ago, there was a whole brouhaha with Deborah Lipstack left one Young Israel. One of them actually left the Young Israel movement, one synagogue. There was a bunch of rabbis that were upset that you had dinners where there was featuring, people from Republicans and Trump supporters were there. So they felt that the Young Israel movement was becoming more to the right. So this is seen. I know that you're stressing that it's not, but it's seen by people. I've been talking to quite a few individuals. It's seen as a move to get away from that nexus in a completely different direction. So that's probably where that's coming from, is what I would speculate.
As you say, that's speculation.
Okay, I guess the proof is going to be in the pudding. So, so what is your vision?
Our vision right now, our vision, as I said before, we operate as a team. Our vision is to, as I've been saying during the entire segment here, is that really to increase the communication with our branches, to give the branches a sense that they all belong to this one entity, this National Council of Young Israel, that they have a place to turn to.
Will it be like Lubavitch, where you're going to providing with templates and materials for Young Israels to be on the same page?
I can't speak for Lubavitch, but we will. One of our major goals would be to providing programming materials, as I said before, for all age groups. We will be expanding and offering adult education programming. And again, I want to emphasize that a lot of this is not going to be imposed necessarily or just simply put together by the national body. We are going to work with the branches. We will have local meetings with branch presidents and representatives.
Does that mean you need more money to operate? Because it sounds like
I'm sorry?
Are you going to need more money to operate then?
We'll need fundraising will be a major component of what we need to do. The branches do pay dues as well to the council, but fundraising is on our agenda. It's a very important item that has to be addressed, and we will be addressing that on a very
Let's squeeze in Rabbi David. Well, let's squeeze in one more phone call. Let's go to Menachem in Maplewood, New Jersey. Your question for Rabbi David Warshaw. Go ahead.
Thank you, Zev, for a wonderful program. You've never come in more clear than you have in the last 40 years. Rabbi Warshaw, the question I have that I'm sure is in the back of almost every listener to tonight's program is, we're trying to read between the lines because there never a change, the drastic change that you're undergoing right now doesn't come about in a vacuum. There is something that propelled this, and it seems like it's almost due to possibly a lot of the individual young Israels threaten maybe to leave the fold because of what's going on. There is something more here than meets the eye. It's going to come out eventually, and I think it's important that you level with people or members. I happen to be a member of actually two young Israels, and I was very surprised to hear that this was going on.
The clock is ticking. We're almost out of time. Let Rabbi Warshaw. We have 1 minute left. Go ahead, Rabbi Warshaw.
This was not propelled, in all honesty, by anything at all, and this is complete transparency. What I'm telling you right now, it was not propelled by anything. It was propelled by one motivator, as I said before, and that was that the feedback that we got and the messaging that we received from people from other branches was that there was a tremendous need for increased services to the branches, working together with the branches, communicating with the branches of Young Israel, and that was the sole motivator for this effort. It was nothing political and we were not reacting to any other external events or causes or anything.
We're out of time, Rabbi Menachem. Thank you for your phone call, Rabbi David Warshaw, incoming national president of the National Council. We appreciate you being here. We look forward to hearing some wonderful things. I go back with you a long time, so it's good to have you on the air finally.
Thank you.
That about does it for tonight. For more information about all of Talklines, we're on every night on the radio. Contact us at 212-769-1925. Email us at info@talklinenetwork.com. Go to online, talklinenetwork.com. If you miss any of our broadcasts, go to jewishpodcasts.org to catch any of our past shows. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.